I wanted to show the inside Cold War with another neighbor, Georgia, inside Russia's Cold War with another neighbor, Georgia, because this is a parallel that I've drawn numerous times as well. Because this is exactly what happened in the aftermath of George W. Bush mentioning that George W. Bush mentioning on his way out that Georgia and Ukraine should be invited into NATO. Now, on his way out, George W. Bush suggested Ukraine and Georgia should be invited into NATO. At the time, there were correspondents within the Defense Department. I think like people that worked in the Biden administration, people that worked with the Biden administration, people that worked in the Bush administration, all saw this as a genuine problem, and they recognized that this would be a red line for Russia, and that they would absolutely 1,000%, not allow that, and would go in and create a territorial dispute or seize up more land from Georgia, seize up Georgian land specifically so that they would not be aligned with NATO. Russia used an identical reasoning and said that there were Russian lives under threat, and we're about to see this in the video here too, probably. But they said that there were Russian lives at threat, and they took over territory in a similar capacity. And of course, because it was happening during the time with Occupy Wall Street and the major global economic collapse, no one really gave a shit. Sorry, this is just the truth. I'm not saying that it was like not important or anything like that. I'm simply stating that a lot of people did not care about this because it happened to coexist on the planet with major economic collapse, the housing market crash. Okay? I live in Atlanta, and I didn't know Russia was this close to Georgia. No, Georgia, the country, not Georgia, not American Georgia. Okay. Yeah, Russia is. By the way, Georgia's population is like 4 million, which is 1/10 of Ukraine's. The scale of that war was not even close to what's about to happen, and Putin's interest in Georgia was nothing like his apparent current motivations. The similarities are mostly cosmetic. 2 weeks ago, if you asked me this, I would have said it's an identical motivation. Now, I don't know, because he has gone way beyond what a leader that is genuinely exclusively interested in creating a territorial dispute in an effort to stop Ukraine from joining NATO would do. Okay? Way beyond. Like, completely, absolutely beyond. Like, the actions within Ukraine at this very moment, and the justifications for what, and the justifications that Putin is using to invade Ukraine, the entirety of Ukraine, are unlike anything else. It's just straight up taking everything. So if your goal is to stop, if your goal is to stop NATO from further encroaching into your regional sovereignty, or if your goal is to even stop Nazis, right? Bullshit, but we'll get to that in a second. Then you don't invade the country, because you just did two things that you now emboldened nationalist groups that are going to gain way more legitimacy as a consequence of being the saviors. And also, you now emboldened other countries and legitimized their genuine fears of Russia coming after them. Now, Finland and Sweden are going to talk about joining NATO. It's just an absolute fucking idiotic strategic misstep. So even all of the even people like Mersheimer, who have predicted accurately what Russia was going to do, I don't know what his current standing is, okay? What his current perspective is on this. But even people like Bernie Sanders, who has a similar opinion that I do, even people like Jeremy Corbyn, who has a similar opinion to myself, even Noam Chomsky, I don't know what his current analysis on the situation is. There's a reason why a lot of people that you would normally see as progressives, right, had a similar position on NATO. Yanis Varoufakis as well, similar position on NATO and providing adequate, an analytical and adequate understanding of what Russia's motivations were, have all said the exact same thing, to say this is completely unjustifiable. Completely. There is no justification for the actions of Russia. None whatsoever. So much so that, like I said, a lot of the people that got this wrong in the lead up to the invasion into Kiev, that said, I'm suspicious of the American intelligence on this matter because it seems fucking insane, were not just limited to Western leftists, a few Western leftists, but actually the Ukrainian leadership. Like the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, Ukrainian citizens, people who live in Ukraine, who have lived with Russia in their backyard and have been fearful, understandably fearful of Russia doing crazy shit in their backyard for a very long time. They have done military exercises on that border to do a demonstration of force year over year for the past 8 years. What's different this year? Why now? Why this year? Why invade in the way that he invaded? Right, bro, just let NATO install rockets 5 minutes away from Moscow. Dude, shut up. Shut up. This just in, Hasan is on his way to Moscow to suck a dick. Thank you for... I love the chat not understanding my position whatsoever, because look, that guy is saying, right, bro, let NATO install rockets 5 minutes away from Moscow because he's defending Russia. He's defending Russian interests in here and doesn't understand my position at all. This guy is saying, this just in, Hasan is on his way to Moscow to suck a dick. Thank you for your sacrifice, because he thinks I'm defending Putin. And he thinks I believe that Putin is in the right here. Incredible. Same chat. Same chat. Same sentiment. Perfect example of like the two fucking idiots, the two different kinds of idiots in this chat. Oh, maybe he was joking. He was joking about me sucking Putin's dick to end the war. Okay, sorry, I misunderstood. The other guy was just stupid. And then the third guy, you're just not good at explaining your stances. Lemafayao. Yeah, that's true. I did make that joke. I said, I asked chat if it meant stopping the invasion, would you suck Putin's dick? And then I answered, yes, I would do that because I am not a selfish person. Let's watch this.
A few weeks ago, Amiran Jeyranashvili followed his cows across this ravine near his village.
Wait, let me do a quick scan on this. I want to see this. Also, shouts out to the Georgians. You never get coverage on this broadcast. You're about to get some coverage on this broadcast. I mean, it's a big moment for your country. Just saying. You know, Portuguese people, you're probably very upset that I'm covering Georgia before Portuguese news, but it is, I think, very relevant to the subject matter. So, not the K Kona, Georgia. Okay. All right, I think it's safe.
A few weeks ago, Amiran Jairanashvili followed his cows across this ravine near his village and discovered he'd stumbled into Russian-controlled territory. The animals don't know where the boundaries are, do they? This is the place where you were detained?
That's true. I do occasionally talk about history's most famous Georgian. A manlet.
Jairanashvili was detained in a region that's known as South Ossetia, a breakaway state that Russia considers an independent republic, and Georgia calls occupied territory. In 2008, the two nations fought a brutal 5-day war over this area that ended with a
I want to make sure that this is
stalemate. But in the last several years, Russia's begun building the trappings of a formal state, installing barbed wire fences and military outposts along what it considers the border. And Georgian officials have been bringing reporters here to show that the situation has only gotten worse. Does it make you angry that people are getting detained while they're trying to do their jobs? For Georgian officials, Russia's actions are making the case for something they've been after for more than a decade: membership in NATO.
Joining NATO and Euro-Atlantic integration is one of top foreign policy priority for Georgia.
David Zakaliani is Georgia's newly appointed foreign minister. Do you think it's really realistic, though? I mean, it has been 10 years.
Yes, it has been 10 years, but we are implementing successfully all reforms in the military and defense sector. We are the biggest per capita contributor to the Resolute Support Mission in Afghanistan, and we are fighting together with United States, together with other NATO allies. I mean, Georgia deserves to be finally accepted to the NATO full-fledged member, and it's the only political barrier towards the final membership.
It's been a frustrating campaign for Georgia. In 2008, NATO promised Georgia it would be offered a formal path to membership. But the invitation has never come, held up by members who don't want to invite an open conflict with Russia.
That is the reason why Russia engages in the open conflict to begin with. Once again, you might not agree with it, you might disagree with it, you might agree with it, but that is the stated purpose. That is the real reason beyond territorial ambitions and things of that matter. Because if a country that is directly on top of Russia, that Russia has declared to be a red line, is allowed into NATO, in the eyes of Russia, in the eyes of the Russian state, now you have the entire nuclear power of NATO states matched up against the nuclear power of Russia. And that's why the NATO countries don't actually want Georgia or Ukraine to ever be a part of NATO. Because if they are admitted into NATO when they are in active territorial conflict with Russia, that would mean that would be the same as America sending troops into Ukraine right now, or America sending troops into Georgia right now, which would mean it's on the ground military warfare with two nuclear power nations. If you were confused as to why America kept saying, we're going to defend Ukraine, but then also kept saying, Joe Biden kept saying, we're never going to send troops there. Americans, get out of Ukraine. We are not going to defend you with our troops. If Russia invades, and we have intel that it's going to, we are not going to defend you. You're on your own. The reason why America said that is because the alternative, the actual fight between the fight that extends beyond proxy wars, which, you know, America's been waging against Russia in perpetuity, the aftermath of the Cold War, has been, there are other NATO nuclear countries, I know, but it doesn't matter. 1 nuke, 10 nukes, it doesn't matter. 1 nuke is all it takes, motherfucker. That's why I always say 3 rules. Get a nuke if you want to fucking do nation building. Okay? 1 nuke, the difference between 1 nuke and 10 nukes is completely inconsequential, okay? 1 nuke, 2 nuke, 3 nukes, 4 nukes, it doesn't matter. The whole point of a nuke is that it wipes out an entire fucking country. Or not a country, but, you know, an entire region. All you need is 1. Good to have more if you've already done 1. And for those who are saying Russia already has NATO countries on its borders, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, or even once it takes over Ukraine, if they take it in its entirety, then Poland, right? Because Belarus is the buffer state there. If you were to say that, well, then Russia can't go into those countries because NATO. That means nuke versus nuke. For one reason or the other, these two were considered to be red lines. I don't know what the actual significance of it is. Probably the size of the it's probably the size of the country, the length of the border, the strategic position between Ukraine and Moscow. I mean the distance between Ukraine and Moscow. But that's what it is. I'm not Vladimir Putin. Okay? And oh yeah, I mean that's true. The Baltic states were added when Russia was collapsing, and not when it's like a developed energy client of European states and America as well. So there's that too. Literally, Vlad Hasan Putin, but go off.
And that's raised a question that Georgian politicians are reluctant to engage with, at least in public.
To some extent, are you carrying on as if NATO might not happen?
I think that we have to do our job, what we are doing right now, and to wait for the momentum. And I believe that this momentum will come.
That's the right thing to say.
Yeah.
But you know, it has been. I mean, it must be a frustrating time.
I believe that despite all these difficulties, we have to demonstrate strategic patience. And we have to continue all these reforms.
And I want to clarify one more time for the record. I hope you understand where I'm coming from. None of this justifies what Russia has done or is doing. Okay? None of this justifies what Vladimir Putin is doing currently in Ukraine. I know I have to specify this because people are they're like used to just hearing black and white. This is right, this is wrong. So I need to clarify one more time. What Vladimir Putin is doing is wrong. It is morally abhorrent. It is completely unacceptable. Okay? Please understand it. Okay? So when I give you an explanation as to why certain actions might be taken by the Russian government, I'm not using this as a justification, okay? And especially not a justification for what Vladimir Putin is doing currently.
Gia Nodia is a former minister of education and one of the few people in Tbilisi to openly acknowledge how little has changed in 10 years. Georgia has been talking about NATO membership for a long time now.
Right.
Is it happening?
Okay, it's not happening, but we have what we have. We have a promise that we will become members of NATO eventually, and this promise is reiterated on every NATO summit. I mean, the Georgian policy community understands that membership of NATO is somehow, somewhere far in the horizon.
But they don't say it.
They don't say it in public, of course.
Why not?
Yeah, because it's unpopular, because it plays into hands of Russian propaganda, because Russians say that, oh, the West does not care about you.
Pro-Russian parties have been making inroads in recent elections, and although 3/4 of the country still supports joining NATO, Nodia says relying on empty promises has left Georgia exposed.
War with Russia.
The reason why they have a George W. Bush Street, by the way, is because of George W. Bush starting the conversation about saying Georgia should be a part of NATO.
Showed that the West supports us to some extent, but not really strongly. So we cannot fully rely on that. There is no plan B in the sense of joining some other security organization, but the plan B is really having very good relations with all our neighbors.
If Georgia joined NATO, do you think that would help this situation? Nothing seems to scare the Russians right now. Would you fight again? Really?
Possible context is in Armenia. Georgia is literally positioned between Russia and its only base in the region, which is in Armenia. Again, not a justification, more political context. Perhaps the Haas news sign. I know, but like no matter what you say, people want you to fucking just be like, no, it's because he's a madman. And by the way, he is a madman. Like Vladimir Putin is a fucking madman. So everything that I'm describing to you, I know it's like easy to be like, oh, it's just fucking propaganda. He's just a madman and he wants like all the territories. He wants to recreate the USSR. Okay? He wants to recreate the USSR. He wants all of it. His actions in Ukraine, like the way that he's operated in Ukraine, does legitimately offer credence to that fucking way of doing analysis, which is not doing analysis at all. So there is that reality as well.